Welcome to another week. This week we are talking about guidance through different intervention strategies. I'm going to give you a quick little tip of the week. We're going to talk about early interventions and 4 attachment styles, as well as your assignment for this week. A couple quick tips for teachers. One is there's lots of power struggles at every age, including when children are 1.5 or 2 or 3. So giving 2 choices, but acceptable choices, so 2 things that sound okay to you that they get to choose from helps a ton. And then children of all ages love to argue as well. So when the question is why, and it keeps being why, and you know that you've already answered why, it's a way to hook you, to get you focused on continuing to engage. So the best thing to do is what's called become a broken record. So you could say something like, I've already explained and I care too much to keep arguing or talking about this right now. I've heard and we've talked about it, and now the decision has been made. So you're not gonna keep answering questions when you know that it's really a trick to keep you arguing. And again, no one does it on purpose, but when you feel yourself debating back and forth with a student, that's when you're going to want to stop, right? And maintain control. Why early intervention matters. There's some interesting research, and some of this you looked at in ECE 101. But when we talk about critical or sensitive periods, we know that our brains, the younger we are, the more malleable they are, meaning they can change and be flexible, and the more connections that are being made. And so we know that there are very sensitive periods for attaching to others, for language development, for the development of a lot of different skills. And so we want to make sure that we're giving them an appropriately enriching environment and experiences. And then we can look for risk factors, and we know some of the stress or trauma risk factors that all ages can experience. So we're going to provide extra supports for students that need that. When we think about cultural differences and gender differences as well, it's hard to believe, but there's a lot of expulsions in preschool. And those children are at high risk for getting into trouble or for dropping out later. So we want to keep supporting these children and not having them leave our school and our care. 80 of 100 preschoolers who are expelled are boys. So when we think about maybe what are the types of behaviors or the ways that teachers are handling conflicts with boys, it's really important. And we know that our environment and our teachers are really mostly girls, right? And so they're set up more to support a lot of our female students at times, and not other students that may not identify as such or may be boys. So thinking about things we can do to support all of our learners is going to really help as well. There's a survey, and I put the link here, although you don't need that. It is in your assignments. It is a stress inventory. Some of them you can fill out for yourself, or you can think of experiences you've had in your family. And it's really looking at how much stress is in our lives right now, and then thinking about the more stress that's occurring, the more we want to give ourselves extra support, give ourselves some of that extra care. When we wrote about how we were going to take care of ourselves as well, it's really important. So there's a lot of stress, right? Economic experiences that we're having at home or that are happening in the world. And then trauma from maybe our friends or family or children that we work with that they're experiencing that traumatizes us. So looking at ways that we can continue to support ourselves, the more we can take care of our own stress levels, the more we can support our students. And there are times in our lives where, we do experience a lot of stressors, and that's a part of life. But then we need to look at what extra supports can we get to keep taking care of ourselves. This should be a little bit of review from your earlier course as well, but there's 4 attachment styles, main attachment styles that have been found in infants and young children. These traits tend to stay with us through our lives, but there are ways that we can develop more secure or healthy attachments if we started off not doing so. There's a short video that talks about Mary Ainsworth's strange situation that shows how they researched that with infants and how infants respond when they're put into kind of a strange or, uncomfortable situation without their parents, and how they respond to their parents when they return. So a majority of children, but it's not a large majority, it's around 65%, have secure attachment. So they tend to use their family members or their teachers that they're very close to as a base, meaning they want to stay near them, but they still have some independence and exploration as well. And it's healthy and it's balanced. There's another 15% or so that are anxious ambivalent. So those might be children that are very, very clingy or have a very hard time. You hear of slow to warm up babies, but also they might be ambivalent, meaning they might kind of ignore at times or act like they don't care. So it's still an attachment, it's just less secure. Avoidant as well, that's what it sounds like. So they might act not happy and stay away from a caregiver if they were put in a situation that, let's say a parent leaves, they might act frustrated or avoid the parent when the parent comes back for them. It's still an attachment, just not as secure. And then last is disorganized. That's the least common. It usually comes with more ongoing stressors and trauma that students have faced, and they might look a little bit of everything. So sometimes they're anxious, sometimes they're ambivalent, sometimes they're avoidant, and they're having a hard time attaching. Again, they're still attached though. And I say this because there's one other attachment style that I wanted to talk about. There's something some call RAD, which sounds a little funny, but it's very serious. It's called reactive attachment disorder, and it's really a non-attachment. These are for students or children and adults that have really had ongoing traumas, and they're not attaching really in any way other than in kind of a superficial way, right? So they're not attaching in the way we think of attachment. There are treatments for that, and we can keep working on if you're thinking, oh gosh, I think I have an anxious attachment, or, my partner or my boyfriend or girlfriend, they're kind of an avoidant attachment. Those are not uncommon, and we know that we can develop an earned secure attachment. So some of us may not have started with a secure attachment, and sometimes that's really healthy and safe, right? If I'm a young child and I'm not in a very safe environment, then it makes sense that I'm not securely attached. If I securely attached myself to someone that isn't safe or isn't good to me, that's not good for me, right? So we can work sometimes with counselors or therapies, but sometimes on our own as well, just developing those skills. And how I can do that as a teacher to help my students is being very ongoing presence, making sure that I'm following through, making sure that I'm always speaking in a kind and loving manner and showing patience. And none of us are going to be perfect by any means, right? But we can help ourselves and our students develop an earned secure attachment. I wanted to touch base as well, when you think about disorganized attachment or reactive attachment disorder, there's a second video that I attached called the Still Face Experiment. And what that video shows me is that sometimes we're not engaged or we're not paying attention. We might be going through our own stress or our own busyness, and so we're not being attentive to the children we care for. Of course, we want to always be attentive, but we're human, and so things happen. One time, but we're overall good. Children will bounce back from that. But there are experiences in terms of long-term stress or trauma where it might be ongoing, where they're not connecting to and they're not getting their emotional needs met by adults. And that's when we get more of that disorganized or reactive attachment disorders happening. This week, you're going to be looking at two things. One is a discussion related both to our stress levels and what we can do to support ourselves, and then also related to how we can support different attachment styles in students. And we're also going to write a lesson plan. I'm going to show you how to do that in a moment. And this is our last week of new material. Next week, we have a final exam. It's going to be related to different scenarios with students. It's open book, it's open notes, and you take all the time that you need, but it's due. Everything's due by May 8th, and then I'm submitting grades. You're also going to write a brief reflection on what types of growth and things have you learned related to guidance strategies this semester. Give me one moment and I will show you an example of the social story lesson plan and book assignment for this week. So you have a blank lesson plan template, but you're going to pick something related to social emotional needs or guidance in the classroom, and you're going to fill out the lesson plan with title, materials, what you want students to learn, and so on. I'm giving you one example. So I made a lesson plan for sharing with others. I listed books that I need. So your assignment is either to create your own social story or your own book, similar to what you did at the beginning of the semester on that same topic, or to find 3 or more books online on that topic. So in this case, I looked up books for preschool children related to sharing, and I have a few here. I've got Llama Llama Time to Share by Anna Dewdney. I've got I Can Share by Karen Katz, and I've got Peppa Pig Learning to Share by Meredith Rusu. I also would need large paper and markers for my lesson. My objective, that means what I want students to learn. So I'm going to tell them we're going to learn how to share well with others. Okay? And then we're going to list what's going to happen at the beginning, the middle. We cut off, so I'm just going to restate. We're going to list our title. We're going to list related books, either 3 or more that we find online related to that topic for young children, or we can create our own single book. We're going to talk about what we want students to learn, and then we're going to list what we're doing at the beginning, middle, and end of the lesson. So at the beginning, I wrote, we'll spend a few minutes talking about sharing, how to share, and why it's important. And we'll write that on a big piece of paper. Maybe I'll do pictures as well, because we know most children in preschool are not reading. By the middle of the lesson, I'm just going to, for this lesson, choose one of the 3 books to read, and that'll be chosen based on a class vote, with students understanding that the other 2 books are going to be read during the week as well. And after I read that book, we will talk about what the book taught us. We're going to practice sharing with students paired with each other. So children will take turns. One will hold a toy that they like, and then the other student will ask if they can play with it as well, and then they'll share with their partner. So I'm going to start by modeling this either with another adult or with one child, and so we would practice. Can I have my turn playing with that? And I'll say sure. Or I could say, sure, give me a minute, and then use a sand timer. And then the partner will practice saying thank you. So I'm going to demonstrate that first. And at the end of the lesson, all the children will pair with a friend and they will practice that. They're going to demonstrate what they learned. That's our assessment. I want to know, did they learn or not? They can demonstrate that, and they can share one reason or one thing they learned about sharing or why it's important. We want to always think about how to assess whether or not students learned what we discussed, and ways to make it more or less challenging for, again, students that might be struggling more or are ahead. So in this case, I wrote, if students are struggling, I might have them receive extra praise for sharing, and they're going to do some practice with me before they work with a peer. For those that it's really easy for, let's say most of my children struggle with sharing, but one does not. They could choose to make a picture of sharing, or write a sentence about why sharing is important if they're advanced. They could also talk about when sharing isn't required. So it might be a very fragile thing, a very special family possession. Maybe the other child is not being kind, or they're just grabbing it from us. And so to talk about how to ask for an adult for help and so on might be a way to make it more challenging for those that it's easy for. So you're going to pick your topic and fill out a lesson plan just like this. I look forward to seeing your submissions this week, and we will talk again soon.